So welcome everybody, my name is Paul, and today I'm going to talk a little more about the world transition that we're going through, and it's pretty obvious to everybody by now, and I've been talking about this for a really long time, way back into college years, and especially the prelude to 2001 and 2012 and all. So I've been fascinated by this subject for a long time, and on the way I've made a lot of different videos and sort of prognostications and so on. And I want to emphasize at the start here that I'm not a prophet. I'm just someone who's a reporter, an observer, and getting some kind of a sense of the trends that we're in and see where they're all going. And along the way, I've made some various statements about different things that seem like are going to happen. And as I've gotten older, I realized a lot of these things I've predicted long came true, but they didn't come exactly the same way in the manner or whatever. So basically, we can all get at least a little bit of a guidance from our own intuition and observation. I want to share some of my particular observations with you today. Basically, pardon me. Basically, there is a lot of variables in calculating what the trend of society is going to be. There are people who spend lots and lots of money, stock predictors and trend forecasters, weather forecasters, and they're trying to integrate all these different variables and see where the trends are. And some of them do pretty well, and there's people who write algorithms for computers and so on regarding weather and commodity prices and so on. Now, the actual world situation is a lot more than just the finances, of course, and there's a lot of stuff going on. There's various kinds of catastrophes, and there's various places in the world that food production is going on and manufacturing is going on. There's shipping issues and climate issues, and the list goes on and on. So essentially, if we want to try to get a sense of the trends, we have to consider all those variables. And you know, I'm sure that a lot of the people listening to this, especially the real experts here, will know that we basically need a quantum computer. We need some kind of almost like phenomenal estimator, calculator, trend watching, artificial intelligence sort of thing. Now, you and I, our little peons here, and fighting the usual suspects, we have to kind of get a sense of the trend of our own life here, and we have to do that with the means that we have. We don't have the supercomputers. We have intelligent observation and our own awareness, and we have groups of people who have intuitions and dreams, and you can get a synopsis or a summary or a trend, and then you have to kind of go on your intuition, you see. So I have told people along the line here and discussed many of the different options. I've talked about individual types of things like power supply outages and weather phenomenon and tsunamis and political instability and so on. And all of those factors play a role. Now, I do a lot of thinking about this, and I watch a lot of video content and listen to people, and I have read a lot of books, and I'm not an irrational person, although a lot of people, there might be people who don't know me very well, they say, well, that guy, I don't know what to think about him, but he's got some strange ideas. But if you know me personally, I have a background in some electronics and photography and computers, and I'm well-traveled, and I'm an aviator, and I'm a very practical person. And a lot of the reasons that I have investigated these things for a long time, the world transition, is because simply that it affects my own life personally. Where am I going to live and so on. So I want to talk a little bit about what I think is maybe the trend here. Now, I don't want to put any kind of date on something, but you can see basically there's a number of phenomena that are going on. There's things that are talked about in the news. We know the economy and all that, but everything that you see in the news, the so-called news, we'll never understand it. Will never make any sense if we don't have a lot of other additional information that you will never ever get. things just face it, we have to admit to ourselves that we don't get all the information. We don't even know if what we're hearing on TV is true or not, and most of it is not. So we don't even know where to go for true information, so we try to make our own best guess decisions, and there's a lot of things we don't want to talk about. For example, we don't want to talk about tsunamis and power outages globally or banking failures and so on. That's something like not polite conversation. Maybe we could talk about the power outage that lasts a couple of days and it's very inconvenient and so on and whatever. Maybe we can talk about that stuff. It's not too bad. But the reality of our existence is there. If you just look at history, where are all the empires? You see, what happened to them all? They're all the big ones, really big ones, bigger ones that lasted a lot longer than our 300, 400 years that were last few hundred years here. And where are they? They're just gone. So these are the kind of things that don't make polite conversation. But if we want to be really sensible and alert people, we have to kind of really think about some of these things and at least consider them and do a little investigation to see how logical or how likely certain things might happen. Now, it gets back to the quantum computer. Basically, we have this, hopefully we have our intuition, there's dreams, and there are people who have dreams and, they make a change in their life and they avoid a problem. So let's hope that some of our own intuition amongst the common people here, we don't have bunkers and we don't have seed storage and we don't have billions of dollars stored up in our gold deposit or underground bunkers or anything like that. So we have to kind of get some sense of what might be happening. Now, one of the things that is pretty obvious is the worldwide banking system is built on a house of cards. Essentially, the fact that they loan money they don't really have. You see, once upon a time, there would be a situation where, you really had gold. Like you'd go and, there was a primitive system of banking where you'd leave a deposit of gold and say, I have this note now, and when I come back, I can give you this note and I can get my gold back, you see. But I don't want to carry the gold with me along my trip. It's too heavy, but as long as I have this paper here, I can redeem my gold. And so there's sort of a primitive way of like saying, okay, this paper that we have in our hand, honestly, there is a lot more imaginary digital money by far than there ever is in cash. So if there was a situation where people were to panic for whatever reason, power outage could be anything. A lot of panic situations can happen. Temporary, short-term, long-term, whatever. And everybody decides, hey, well, maybe I'll need a little cash here, and maybe I'll go down to my ATM and pull out about $500 or $600, or maybe a couple thousand, and they go, oops, they're all closed because everybody wants that money, and they're all out of money, they're all out of cash. So you got to wait for the Brinks truck to come and fill up the machine with some cash. So there are some situations that we don't really want to think about, but we have to think about it a little bit. How will human beings interact if we suddenly lose the opportunity to get into our digital bank records, where we don't really know if there's any money there or not? There's no gold in there. If you go into a bank on Monday and say, here's my $10,000, I'm going to put it in your bank here, and thank you very much for holding on to it, me. And then you go back to the next day and say, well, I put my money in the bank yesterday, and today I want to take it all out. They'll say, well, we'll have to go in this back room over here and talk to the manager over here, because we're not really sure if we have $10,000 of cash in the till right here. And why would you want to take that money out and all that stuff? So fill out this little form, and I'll take your picture and sign for it and everything, and maybe you'll get your money tomorrow. So there are situations that I would suggest that we might want to think about without getting too particular about it. You can use your own tuition and guidance, and So another one is the coastlines. Now, we know from very recent history, very recent history, storms, floods, traffic. If you get too close to the coastline, there's just a real possibility there's some problems there. Sooner or later, there's going to be some serious problems. Do you want to be stuck there? So, the electrical system of this country is very vulnerable. So, I predict, and I see a trend line where a combination of things. You see, it can't be just one thing, but let's say, for example, let's say a building, or, there's a structure and it has like 20 legs, 20 pillars holding it up, and, you cut one down, it's not too bad. Okay, cut two, man, you go on. By the time you get the 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th structural support of a system, the physics takes care of itself, you see. So there's a lot of things that we have to look at in life and say, what are the pillars of support for the system that we live in? Well, we have the police, we have the fire people, we have the hospital people, and we have the farmers, and we have the miners, and the truck drivers, the transportation people, and the food producing, selling people. Now you cut down some of those things. Now I went to the grocery store today. Today is December 20th, 2021, and I'm talking about a tipping point here. I'm not joking, and I'm a rational person. I'm saying that enough of these legs, these supports of our system, are starting to get really in a very fragile condition, because I went to the grocery store today and I look around the shelves and it's never been like that, and you just think, okay, I can get most of the things I need and so on. I couldn't get the cat food or whatever, the kind of cat food I wanted, but I got pretty much what I wanted. But I just see more and more people shopping, and then they're not stocking the shelves up again. There's things missing. There's like, okay, at what point do you get where there's 30% of the stuff left on the shelves? At one point, so it's impossible to calculate a timeline exactly. Okay, there's many, many variables, like amoeba moving along. It's slowly, there's weather things, and then there's political things, and there's this and that, and there's all this whole system that's evolving, and where is it trending to, see? And I try to sound the alarm to people just because there's a lot of things you can mitigate. I'm an aviation student and pilot, and there's things you can mitigate. You talk to a sailor, well, they're trained. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do that. Now, any good leader, if we have any good leaders in our public domain that are on the ball and not corrupt, they might start thinking about some of these things instead of protecting their own little behind. So without getting into some of the things that we can't mention here, but there's a lot of what we might call incompetence and failures of integrity and corruption and blackmail and things like that. Now, that brings a whole other story here, because, as I mentioned many times, the current events do not make any sense unless you take into consideration certain things, like the fragility of the banking system. There's information that people know that we don't know about trends and food production and shipping, and how much oil there is left, and volcanic action and potential natural disasters. There's satellites going around that can scan in and they know what's under the ground. They know where all the volcanic activity is, and they have like a moment by moment sensitivity of exactly where the Earth is tilting and the weather systems. And like the supercomputer, you're trying to figure out, well, the tipping point, that one thing, like, they just, like that game Jenga blocks or whatever, you stack up these blocks and then everybody takes a turn picking one out, like, okay, is this the one that you pull it out, like, okay, not this one, but it was close. So there are certain things that when things get off balance, people's behavior becomes some irrational, and this is where I'm more afraid of people's behavior than I am of some of the natural things. Because if you choose a good place to live and you live simply and you have some supplies and whatever, there's a good chance that you can really transit through some rapids pretty well. Okay, if you're handy, if you got a little community going on, and you can. But people's behavior can get really crazy, and then you can't talk to them. So I try to put my word out there about some understanding, because long before a crisis happens, okay, let's say you're on a plane with somebody, or let's say you're on a ship with somebody, and you're going to cross this big ocean, and you hope to God that the people in the boat with you, that if there's any crisis, there won't be any like crazy people there on your boat with you, because somebody's like, go shoot the captain because they don't like him. So what trend lines do I really see? I see a conversion of financial issues. I see a convergence of ignorance and people not getting services. There's a lot of people that do not understand. They're not mentally, physically capable of coping with certain kinds of problems, where a lot of people, maybe people listening to this, can cope. They have some resources or whatever. They have some adaptability, but there's an awful lot of people who just, they won't even be able to understand what's going on. And there are things about to happen. There are things going on right now that are inconceivable, that it's kind of like that overload information where we just say, okay, I can't take any more in. I hear you watch the news on TV and blah, 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 where they repeat the same thing over and over again and hyperventilate and everything, and they just go on and on. I suggest to people, it's a serious situation that we're in, and it's not getting easier, it's not getting better, and the momentum is in the wrong direction, and there's a whole lot of converging things that we're now at a tipping point where, let me give you the example. Let's say a building is about to fall down. There's an earthquake. Okay, if you're in the building and on one of the top floors, and then it goes down, well, that's a really serious problem. But if you have about half an hour notice or something, or you have just a general sense of what's going to happen, or you may be miles away when it happens, or at least you might be down in the basement or something. You see, so prudence and observation, like weather forecasters, if you want to travel in a plane, you're going to go a long distance, so you got to look at the weather 200, 300 miles away if that's part of your destination. Most of us in our daily life are lucky if we go 20, 30 miles. And we don't care about the weather in town far away, or whether they got an earthquake down by the coastline a couple hundred miles from here. It doesn't affect you. But it will affect us all, because what's going to happen here is a lot of people, I'm a realtor, and people are moving out of town, out of the countries, into the country, and they're trying to find places. And naturally, that's a beautiful thought, and especially a lot of the young people, they want to go out and start their homesteading life and raise their family and so on. But there's a lot of land. It's not necessarily for sale, but even if it is, you got to build there, because the population density is so low out here compared to a large city that you would have to, if a lot of people come here and double the population, you got to build a lot more houses, and the lumber is expensive and it takes time to build those. So there's a trend in the smaller housing and temporary housing. Now, a lot of people in this world, may not know that, but they live in little huts and small little places, and they might live their whole life in a little place. Compared to us, there are people 7,000 square foot house, and they got like so many rooms. They start cleaning it on Monday and get done by Sunday night. How we live makes a huge difference of how we can deal with transition time and things, and our prudence. So the kind of trend lines I see financial, I see natural disasters, I see weather situations, I see a lot of people moving and transiting, I see people having to live simpler, a lot of the young people now in this kind of crises, my sons and daughters or whatever, you know, a lot of people are going to have a hard time finding a house, having the income to have a house, or then they're going to all travel restrictions and businesses slow and so on. So I think people need to get tools to get more resilient and get back to more of a homesteading type of situation. But again, there will be need to be building houses, and the best thing to do, you can live in the countryside. You can live very small in a small space. There are people where I live is bigger than many people have a New York City apartment, but my place is small. But I have the house I live in is small, but I have a small barn and a tool shed and an old cabin that they use for storage, and then there's a stream at the bottom of the hill and cows and wildlife all around, and no street lights and no traffic jams. So I live a very relatively simple life, and that means that I'm very adaptable. I have tools and supplies and things, and you know, I've already endured no electricity, and I've camped out, and worst case scenario I got the equipment, and I got food and a stream, and I can shoot a squirrel or whatever I need if necessary. So being resilient and adaptable is going to be more and more important in the years to come, and particularly the next few years. Now there's some technology that's going to come out here shortly. There's thousands of unreleased patents, and they're being controlled by military and secret elite, and they have access to stuff that you don't. I'll have other videos about it, but there's things that could be released that have to do with health and propulsion and energy and so on, that powerful people don't want to give up on those types of edge. They want to have the power. You see, imagine if you had an iPhone 30 years ago, in the 80s, you walk around with this thing in your hand, and well, I got the answers to this, and I got my computer and my everything, my camera right here in this little thing. I can make a video. You'd look like some kind of magician just 30 or 40 years ago with one of these little things. So, trend lines again, new inventions, be resilient, try to live simply, back up your systems, group together, unite, communal living. People lived communal tribes for thousands of years. I mean, some of the oldest tribes on earth, and they've been there for God knows how long, been eating the same old things in the woods and shooting the same old things, and their civilization, the little civilization, will last longer than ours, you see. So I don't want to make these videos too long, but we are at a tipping point, and I'm not going to try to annoy people, but I'm going to discuss in a rational way the different kinds of options we have, the things, the trend lines that we can consider as possibilities. Electronic interference, these things, these devices are really not very healthy in a lot of ways. I worry about our education system and people learning how to fix things and do things. So if you ever want to have a job, learn how to fix things, because you know, there's not enough carpenters and mechanics and tool makers and things like that. So I'll talk about some of these other things in other videos, and appreciate you watching, and please like and share and consider what I've said, and hope you get some benefit from it. So thanks again.